listeners, and welcome to the NKNews Podcast. I'm your host, Jacko Zwetsloot, and today it's the evening of Tuesday, November 30th in Seoul, and I'm joined in the studio by Kim Hyeong-seok and Dr. J.R. Kim to talk about their newly formed Council on Diplomacy for Korean Unification. But before we get started, I'd like to remind you, please, to leave a review about this podcast wherever you can, and that's so that people can discover our podcasts more easily. No reviews means that the all-powerful algorithm pushes us down the internet podcast rabbit hole into the abyss of oblivion, and no people will ever listen to us. So please leave a review, and while you're at it, share this episode with everyone you know and 3 people whom you don't. Secondly, check out nknews.org and consider buying a subscription. And if you have any feedback, guest suggestions, or guest recommendations, send them to podcast@nknews.org. All right, so to introduce today's guests more fully, Kim Hyeong-seok was Vice Minister of Unification from 2016 to 2017, and is now President of the newly formed Council on Diplomacy for Korean Unification, or CDKU. Thank you for joining me on the show, Mr. Kim.
Yeah, thank you.
And on his right, we have Dr. J.R. Kim, or Kim Jong-no, who is Director General without portfolio at the Ministry of Unification on non-active duty or semi-active duty, active?
Non-active duty. And sabbatical leave now.
Sabbatical leave, pending retirement, and is also Vice President and Secretary General of the same Council on Diplomacy for Korean Unification. Thanks for coming on the show, Dr. Kim.
Thank you, Jacko, for having us on your podcasting.
So what is this new organization? What is the CDKU, the Council on Diplomacy for Korean Unification? What is it? Who wants to start?
Actually, it's a very, very young organization and some kind of some with adventure spirit. As you know, the government level diplomats with civilian organizations in the outside world existed in the Korean society. But in the civilian level, there is no organization. I mean, the unification issue is a very popular issue in Korea and in outside the world. But the civilian level talks about the unification has not been carried out because there is no any organization such as our organization, CDKU. Yeah.
But aren't there other civil society organizations that are older than yours that also talk to civil society organizations in other countries?
Yes, there are, I'm pretty sure, many of such organizations in South Korea. However, what is different from all these organizations is that CDKU is made mostly of retired Unification Ministry officials. And not only those officials, but also people who have spent decades on watching North Korea and studying inter-Korean relations in various different think tanks and academia and so on and so forth. So we are basically old-timers who have experience of doing all these things throughout their entire lives. So this is kind of new in such a combination that no other existing organization, have such a combination of membership.
Okay. What's the aim and the vision then, President Kim Hyeong-seok?
Yes, our aim is to make our dream. Our dream is peaceful unification on the Korean Peninsula. So as I was a government official, we tried our best to make some results toward the peaceful unification. Yeah, but after our the official career, also I wanted to have a chance to make our dream. So that's why we make a CDKU. So the aim of CDKU is to achieve the peaceful unification of the Korean Peninsula within the civilian level. Yeah.
Okay. Now, governments have policies. Every government has policies of how they want to achieve certain things. So every president of Korea, or at least every minister of unification, has some idea what that peaceful unification will look like, some kind of policy goal. What about the CDKU? Does it have a policy or a particular vision about what peaceful unification will look like, what form it will take, how it will work?
No, unlike the government, the CDKU does not have its own policy or policy orientation. As President Kim said, we are just aiming or focusing on promoting awareness in international community for the need of unifying Korean Peninsula peacefully. And as for how to achieve such goals, different government, different administrations, different political factions will have different ideas. But we are not to promote any particular ideas among all those different ideas. We are just to provide more precise and accurate information to international community and share our insight and experience we have had accumulated during our lifelong career in the government and academia and think tanks with the members of international community at a civilian level, which would be just complement to the effort to be made by South Korean government.
Is it possible that at times your own efforts might be different to these, not necessarily complementary to the South Korean governments?
No, one of the advantages of being ex-members of the Unification Ministry would be we would have a full communication with the current members of the ministry. We would exchange the views and ideas and understandings with the current members of the ministry to make sure that our ideas and approaches do not conflict with each other. And we will try to be very general, very moderate in a way of expressing our opinions in any particular issues involving North Korea or inter-Korean policies. We are rather to provide more accurate factual information and insights of understanding on what government is doing to the international community. So we will try very best not to be in a conflict position with the government in any cases under any administrations.
But how can you stay neutral if you are also close to and in contact with and liaising with the current government officials?
Yeah, so that's a very difficult problem. CDKU is some kind of impartial organization, so we have to be very careful about the linkage with the current government. But I think that the Korean government, even though the conservative government or progressive government, the goal of the government is the same, the peaceful unification. As my experience from the government officials, and I worked for the conservative government and also the progressive government, but the same thing and the same goal is the peaceful unification. So I think we can survive without the help of the current government, and also that's the best way to appreciate CDKU's existence, the purpose of the CDKU's existence. So, and also that is the fundamental grounds for CDKU to be last forever. So we just tried to have our own ideas, and we operate with our own powers, without any help from the current government. That's a problem. But anyway, as I said, the current government has the same goal with CDKU. So if we give some cooperation with the current government, that cannot be interpreted as our some kind of not neutral. Yeah, it's some kind of I cannot accept that kind of interpretation. Or
yes, I mean regardless of ideological orientation of any particular administration, it has been public consensus since, I would say, early 1990s, when you have actually, all the different factions agreed on the one unification formula, Korean national community unification formula. From that time on, we all agreed on the various different administrations that we would like to pursue national unification of Korean Peninsula through peaceful means, peaceful unification. That's the common ground on which all different political factions and administrations and parties they vie for. They vie for only the different approaches to achieve peaceful unification. And CDKU's goal is to promote the idea of need for peaceful unification of Korean Peninsula in the international community. And our members comes from all different backgrounds, comes from people served on the different administrations, comes from different think tanks and so on and so forth. Individually, they are entitled to have their own opinions. But overall, the collective wisdom here would be that we are all for peaceful unification of Korean Peninsula, and you would like to share that idea with the members of the international community.
Now, North Korea also claims to want peaceful unification. Is your understanding of peaceful unification different to the North Korean understanding of peaceful unification? Or is that included? Is your tent big enough to include different visions of peaceful unification?
Yeah, the peaceful unification is some kind of the process, some kind of method, not aim or vision. Our vision is democracy for the freedom, and maybe the vision of the North Korea is different from our vision. So even though the North and South Korea altogether say peaceful unification, but the final goal is maybe the different. But CDKU's the final goal is to freedom and freedom and democracy society.
For all Koreans?
Yeah, all Koreans.
Does that mean that a collapse of North Korea and absorption into a unification scenario is necessary?
Not necessary, because that kind of scenario can be conceived, and many times that kind of scenario was just around our corner. But as you know, the current situation of the North Korea is very stable. So that situation, the possibility of that situation is very, very low. And also, we want peaceful unification with the gradual progress. So North Korea and South Korea can be together, just through the continuous process of understanding each other without any big surprise.
Mm-hmm.
So CDKU wanted to help our talent to make the kind of vision or the kind of goals.
Now, J.R., you said a little bit earlier that a lot of your members are what you call old-timers, former members of government or older academics, think tank people, etc. If your vision is one of a gradual, step-by-step process towards unification, it's quite possible that not all of your members will live to see unification happen. Is that something that...
Possible, yes.
Is that something that you're at peace with?
Yes. Personally, I hope that I live up to the time when Korea get unified. But realistically, that may not be the case. And many of our members are in their 60s. Most of them are. And we may not be able to see such a day in our lifetime. But that doesn't mean that we should not do anything and sit idle about it. We have our doors open to all other generations, younger generations of Koreans as well, who have spent their time in the government or in academia or in other think tanks and other areas of society. Those who are all for promoting the idea of peaceful unification of Korean Peninsula are welcome to join us. So we've been just 3 months old organization, pretty young. We have launched in September this year. So as time goes on, we'll have younger generation Koreans joined in, I hope.
Right, because at some point in time, the next generation will have to carry on the leadership of the CDKU, won't they?
Exactly, yes,
Right.
of course.
So you expect to get more younger people involved at some point?
I hope so, yeah, and I'm more than welcome to, have them join the organization, as soon as possible.
And what about women? Are there any women in positions of leadership in the council?
Of course, yeah, but your question is some kind of problematic. We have no distinction between men and women. So we just welcome everyone who is very interested in the Korean Peninsula problem and has an enthusiasm to make some kind of peaceful unification. So, yeah.
True, and I mean, actually, we have in our senior leadership, one of our six vice presidents is a woman, and also we have a couple of members on our board of trustees, and we don't discriminate anybody by their genders or ages or anything like that. So everybody who's interested in promoting this idea of peaceful unification of Korean Peninsula and who have expertise in it are welcome to join us as a member of board, or as the member of the leadership.
Okay, is it? Can people apply for membership to the council, or do you invite people to join? How do people become members?
If you are interested in becoming a member, you can apply for membership. That's all you need to do. If you want to be on the board, then yes, the board members has to screen, and then if they agree that this applicant has enough background, expertise, and then he will be admitted to the board.
Okay, and who are you trying to engage with outside Korea?
The entire international community, including, countries have lots of influence on the affairs of Korean Peninsula, United States, China, Russia, Japan, and so on, and many European nations and Asian nations, and, the entire international community would be our target groups in a way. We would like to communicate with the general public, the opinion leaders, and members of government even. In addition to the effort made by the South Korean government, particularly by Unification Ministry. So all the people in the world are our basic sort of targets.
And what about North Korea? Are you also trying to engage with or send a message to North Korea?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if the situation permits, we tried to make a contact with North Korea. So I think that North Korea has a very totalitarian society. So there is a very small room for civilian organization to operate. So just the person in North Korea listen to the activities of our CDKU's activities, and if they wanted to make some response or wanted to make some linkage with the CDKU, so that is the beginning of the new organization in North Korea. So anyway, we just wanted to make a dialogue and make contact with North Korea.
How can people get in touch with the CDKU? Does it have an email address or a website or a Twitter account?
At this point, we don't have them yet, but we'll soon open our website and Twitter and everything, social network services soon. Yeah, within a couple of weeks or so, we'll have ways of communicating. We'll provide the channels for communication.
Now, you're the council. Let me get the right. The Council on Diplomacy for Korean Unification. North Korea has an organization called the Committee for the Peaceful Reunification of the Fatherland. Is that like your counterpart in North Korea?
We hope, but as you know, our CDKU is a civilian organization, but North Korea's Committee for Peaceful Unification for Fatherland is
party organization.
Party organization. So our Ministry of unification in our government is a counterpart. Yeah,
Okay, so basically there is no
no
counterpart
in
organization
the
in North
developing.
Korea right now, not that you know of. Now, why in 2021 is it necessary to form a group like this? Is there no, or was there no earlier organization, civil society organization like the CDKU in South Korea?
Not really. In terms of its membership, I explained to you earlier, because CDKU is made mainly of former members of Unification Ministry. And Unification Ministry itself has started to having an interest in communicating with the international community or outreaching the international community in late 1990s when they first established Office for International Cooperation in 1996. And it was in 1997 when the ministry actually started sending its attaché to the different cities in the world, including Washington, Beijing, and Moscow. It was those three big major cities back then in 1997 for the ministry to have their representatives. And it was about time now that those who served as our attaché in those places have started to retire from the ministry. And those who have served as the, for example, Director of International Cooperation Division, and those people who have actually been active in communicating with the international community in the ministry have retired about 3, 4, 5 years ago. And it was about time this year in 2021 when those people who retired recently from the ministry got together and thought about establishing an organization, civilian organization, to carry on the missions they have carried on while they were in the ministry. Because now that they are civilians, they have now in a better position in a way, more greater freedom to communicate with different, part of international community, including general public and think tankers and academicians and so on and so forth. So this was the right moment for those ex-members of the Unification Ministry get together to think about launching the organization.
I know that over the years, journalists have had a difficult time communicating with or asking questions about unification and North Korea from the Ministry of Unification, because sometimes the Ministry of Unification will say, well, you should talk to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And sometimes the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will say, well, you should talk to the Ministry of Unification. And so you get this problem where journalists are sent between one minister and another, each of them passing the buck from one to the other. You've now set up your own civilian organization saying that you are the Council on Diplomacy. So are you sort of trying to fill the gap between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Unification?
That could be one of the areas where the CDKU can serve the international community better. I mean, as an active member of a ministry, which I used to be and which Mr. Kim used to be, all the government officials have some limitations in terms of communicating with, media, especially the foreign media, because we all have to abide by the rules and regulations, and especially we have to stick to the government policy, regardless of what your beliefs are, what your thoughts are, and so on and so forth. But being a civilian members with expertise in government works, and we are in a better position to interpret, to assess, and understand the government position, government policy, and not to mention situation in North Korea. And with all our experience and expertise, we can communicate better with the international community in these areas, representing voluntarily the Unification Ministry as well as Foreign Ministry and other ministries, because you also have members who used to serve in the Foreign Ministry and other parts of the government.
Is it fair to say that within the structure of the South Korean government, the Ministry of Unification is really in a weaker position compared to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of National Defense when it comes to policy on North Korea?
Yes, actually, your evaluation is correct. Yeah, but the Minister of Unification only focus on the fiscal unification. Yeah, but the other ministry has another goals. So the unification matter is one of the foreign minister affairs goal and one of the minister of defense. So even though the scale and or the size is small, but the Unification Ministry also has an enthusiasm and also try to persuade the other minister of the cabinet. But the only fact for Minister of Unification to play a very significant role is from the North Korea. So if North Korea just correspond or respond, that is some kind of power for Minister of Unification to play a very significant role in government level.
But if I may add one thing,
please.
Unification Ministry may be weaker and smaller than Foreign Ministry and Defense Ministry and what's not, but it is more focused and more specialized on North Korea and inter-Korean policy and Korean Peninsula affairs. So we are very small in terms of the membership size of the ministry organization, but ministry certainly has very good expertise in understanding North Korea and assessing the situation between the two Koreas.
Now, the North Korea hasn't been willing to speak or interact with the South Korean government for the last 2.5 years, well, ever since the failure of the summit at Hanoi, basically. Does that mean that the Ministry of Unification is in a weaker than usual position, that it's not doing much right now? It's not able to do much right now?
At current situation, that North Korean attitude is the cause that unhappy situation for the Minister of Unification. But and now the North Korea just wanted to make a deal with Washington. So they just neglect. With intention, neglect the contacts or dialogue with South Korea. And the dialogue with North Korea is operated by the Minister of Unification. So at this time, the North Korea's main target is Washington. So the Minister of Unification is playing down. But just beginning the negotiation or dialogue with between North Korea and United States, maybe after that the time is for the period of between South and North Korea. Many kind of dialogue and many kind of interchanges between North and South Korea, and also maybe the economic aid and building of infrastructure will be made by South Korean government, and that kind of project will be handled by Ministry of Unification. So the North Korea maybe when that kind of situation comes, maybe the North Korea just give their attention to the South Korea, and especially on the Ministry of Unification.
Now, sometimes during the history of inter-Korean relations, sometimes the North Korean government likes to ignore the South Korean government and reach out directly to or communicate directly with South Korean civic groups, usually progressive and left-wing organizations. Do you imagine that your organization could also perhaps be contacted directly by the North Korean government at some point in the future?
I would not say that, because our main target or the clients would be international community rather than North Korea. If North Korea has any genuine civic organizations to work with us to promote peaceful unification of Korean Peninsula, we are always ready and welcome to work with them, but which is practically speaking very unlikely. And
does that mean that you're unlikely to speak to the North Korean government if they wanted to speak to you?
Well, it's not the job for the council to deal directly with the government. It will be a job for the Unification Ministry to deal with North Korean government directly in a track one side level of dialogue. We are purely a civilian organization, and we are focusing on track two kind of dialogue with international community in a expert level if it is necessary.
I'm thinking about, there is the South Korean Council of Christian Churches, for example, that sometimes goes and visits North Korea and dialogues with some North Korean. They've got some organization, I forget the name of it now, but let's call it the Council of Christians in Korea. There is a Buddhist organization in South Korea that liaises with a Buddhist organization in North Korea. Whether or not these are purely civic organizations in North Korea, that's obviously open for question, but the South Korean government allows these organizations to liaise with them.
But those specialized civic groups have common interest in their counterpart in North Korea. For example, the Buddhist group has Buddhism in commonality, and many of those organizations are for humanitarian assistance. And CDKU is not an organization that promote or to carry out humanitarian assistance as its major aims or missions or visions. So if there's similar counterparts in North Korea that shares our visions and missions or aims in North Korea, then we are more than welcome to work with them. But in reality, the chances are very slim.
So you've got a new organization, you're 3 months old. Where does your funding come from?
It basically comes from the membership fee and donations of those people who support our cause and who contribute to make our goals to be accomplished. So we are 100% civilian organizations. So we completely depending on contributions from the people like you and me and others.
And what kind of activities do you have planned to achieve these goals?
Well, there are certain limits to what we can do under the COVID-19 situation. Especially, we have difficulty in meeting people, making contact face to face with all different groups in the international community. At a very early days, we are now focusing on making contact or outreaching the foreign experts and opinion leaders residing in South Korea. So, for example, we are trying to start a number of roundtable meetings with those different group of people. We started one roundtable a couple of months ago with resident expert, for example, expert North Korean watchers. And we also started dialogue roundtable with Japanese journalists last week or last month. And we are also to launch a similar roundtable with resident diplomats, businessmen, and English-speaking journalists, for example, and so on and so forth. So we wanted to make this roundtable convene on a regular basis, either monthly, bi-monthly, or quarterly. So these will be our major projects first. And then starting from next year, we'll try to organize a seminar, workshop, lectures for the international communities, and particularly the people, foreigners living in South Korea first, in cooperation with Unification Ministry and other ministries and other think tanks and organizations.
Are there other think tanks and organizations with which you are already allied or affiliated?
Not officially or structurally yet, but our members include people who used to work in all different think tanks, including KINU, Korea Institute for National Unification, or KAIDA, the Defense Analysis Institute, and so on and so forth. So we work very closely with them and hopefully build a more formal working relations partnership with different think tanks existing in South Korea.
And are you? Is there a political leaning in the organization, or do you have people from progressive and conservative South Korean groups?
CDKU is not a political organization. We are very impartial. Yeah, our main theme is the unification matter. So, yeah, that unification matter cannot be controlled by some political the views. So, yeah, we just want to be impartial. Yeah, just focus on the peaceful unification of the Korean Peninsula. Yeah,
Impartial and rational. Rational meaning that we do not lean excessively toward any particular ideological, political leaning.
Now, I know that the Ministry of Unification earlier this year began publishing some kind of a webazine or a magazine in English. I forget, it's had a very long title. I forget the name of it now. I guess that's part of its outreach program. Does your organization, the CDKU, plan to do any publications at all?
Well, we, as I explained to you earlier, would like to open a website as soon as possible, through which we can have better communication with the international community. And we'll also have assessment and opinions, delivered by members of the council, CDKU, and also other experts from the Korean society to share their views with North Korea watchers across the world. So publications in English, of course, yes, we are planning to do that. Newsletters, online communications, that's the one thing we would like to focus on in the future.
Will your council cease to exist as soon as unification happens?
Actually, maybe that's unhappy for us. Yeah, but yeah, that kind of situation maybe actualize. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, but as you know, the first stage goal is to make a peaceful unification.
Yeah.
But the second stage goal for CDKU is to make play a role to coordinate the conflicts and the shorten the gap between the very conflicted the nations. Some kind of crisis management is maybe our second stage goal for CDKU.
Crisis management within Korea.
No, well, if Korean Peninsula is peacefully unified, then of course our immediate aim would be disappeared, and we should cease to exist. But if by then situation requires, then we will also evolve to a new sort of higher level of organization with different aims and missions, namely to promote peace and co-prosperity among the countries in this region with the United Korea. Hopefully that time comes in the near future, before, during our lifetime.
So how do you see good relations and friendship and co-prosperity between a united Korea and Japan?
Actually, the details have to be, I guess, discussed, and one of the reasons for the CDKU to exist is to provide such a forum where people can, with all the nationalities and more, reasonings to discuss these issues. But one of the things we try to look back would be the case of German unification. There are many countries strongly opposed, Germany being unified, especially those countries fell the victim of, World War II, which Germany started. But Germany was diplomatically successfully, both through the government effort and civilian effort, to persuade these countries to, agree on German unification. And unified Germany actually contribute to peace and stability and prosperity of the region, in Europe. And we too have similar, if not the same, issues in this part of the world, that many countries in the region may not strongly support the unification of Korean Peninsula for all different reasons. Japan would be one of the countries that may not, strongly support the unification process. So it would be, Russia, China, and what's not. And one of our jobs, would to to persuade or to show the people in these countries to support the process of Korean unification by making them believe that it will be all the benefits for themselves, their own interests, their national interests, to promote the national unification of Korean Peninsula.
Recently, you had a roundtable with a Japanese journalist. Was this the kind of discussion that you had with him?
Well, this was not the particular topic we had because this is the first launching meeting.
Okay.
But they certainly showed the willingness in communicating with the former members of ministry and experts in Korean society, because they hardly have a chance to meet the Korean government people or those experts in other places, and especially a large group of such experts gathered in one place. And the Japanese journalists all welcomed the idea of having regular communication with them to share all these ideas. Not necessarily we all focus on seeing the same thing, converge on the same ideas, but it would be always better to have such a forum to discuss different views and ideas and exchange opinions, so that people on both sides of EC better understand the others.
Realistically, where would the Council on Diplomacy for Korean Unification, where would it like to be 5 years from now, at the end of 2026?
Well, we will be in a position then in the international community to be recognized as one of the most efficient and effective channel to communicate and exchange views and opinions on North Korea and inter-Korean affairs, and to be in a position to travel all around the world, for example, and invite people all over the world to discuss the issues that we are promoting, the peaceful unification of Korean Peninsula.
Anything to add to that?
It's just mentioned before. I just hope our counterpart organization in the DPRK in North Korea, because as you know, the Korean Peninsula problem is not the problem between South and North Korea. It's a problem with cooperation or with interaction among the international society. So North Korea just want to understand the current situation of the international society. And also South Korea and North Korea want peaceful unification, even though the final goal may be different. But North and South Korea just both want peaceful unification. So they want peaceful unification. They have to understand the international society, and they also have to make a kind of a civilian organization, like CDKU. So after 5 years later, I hope we can make a dialogue and make some seminar with North Korean counterpart.
Yeah, that will be a very good idea and great idea if we can be in that position in 5 years from now, where we can provide a forum, very respected forum for all the international community, including Russia, China, and North Korea, so that people who sincerely desire for peaceful unification, promoting peaceful unification of the peninsula, get together in one forum and seriously discuss these issues out, in a more freely, civilian environment.
Yeah. Well, we hope that you can come back on the show 5 years from now and tell us about that success. I want to thank you again to the President and Vice President of the Council on Diplomacy for Korean Unification. It's quite a mouthful. The CDKU, Kim Hyeong-seok and J.R. Kim. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you already have an NK News subscription, take a look at our NK Pro platform, which offers unparalleled services specifically catered to the needs of professionals who monitor developments on the Korean Peninsula. Inquire about access at membership@nknews.org today. And also, if you have feedback, questions, or guest recommendations or complaints, please send them to podcast@nknews.org. Our thanks, as always, to Arius Dare and Brian Betts for facilitating this podcast, and to Gabby Magnuson, our post-recording producer genius. Thank you, and listen again next time.